In 2001, a franchise roared into life. And few film franchises have done so much damage.
The Fast and Furious has wrecked a lot of cars.
Or gone so far.
Send him in the sewer, bury him alive, send him to space.
And got away with it.
2/3 of the audience were on their feet.
But this wild ride
It's the cars, it's the action.
started out with just one guy.
Also known as Racer
And
X.
some not so law-abiding citizens.
At that time, we were going as fast as 160 miles an hour.
So how did this mother of all car movies
Speaks to us Latinos like no other franchise.
that grew from the street
We didn't race for less than $1,000.
What's it gonna be?
and reached for the stars
Backstage Universal Live. Burn rubber through there, and everybody's like,
Who is this guy? This guy's a movie star.
He had a glow.
from megastars to actual space.
Am I being punked right now?
This is the story of how a family
The principles that come with family.
You never turn your back on family.
of determined filmmakers
We all fought so hard to get it made.
pulled off one hell of a stunt.
That hit the pulse of what young people wanted to be.
And it blew up.
One death-defying moment after another.
They've done some amazing.
Realistic stunts.
Well, not always realistic,
Of course this is crazy.
but definitely.
bigger and bigger and bigger.
And even bigger egos.
They're movie stars.
Welcome to the club.
The Rock only agreed to do this movie if he had to film 0 scenes with Vin Diesel.
Stay the out of my way.
To build a multi-billion-dollar franchise.
Make some money!
Almost by accident.
He would start designing the action sequences before the script was really done.
I remember reading this thinking, he's out of his effing mind.
How is this even going to work?
So fasten your seatbelt for an explosive tale of ingenuity,
This was an ingenious invention.
fearless risk-taking,
That shot's not CG.
tragedy.
The way that he left us, you don't believe it.
Now what?
And more resurrections than the Bible
You think they're dead?
It's kind of like a soap opera.
Surprise.
They just come back.
as we take you from the edge of your bucket seat
You're there to get entertained.
to the edge of beyond.
This is definitely the highlight of my career.
On Icons Unearthed, the Fast and the Furious. Before we get fast and furious, the start of this story is more slow and steady. Just like the career of prolific producer Neil Moritz.
Neil Moritz was already a very successful producer,
Working on films like Volcano and I Know What You Did Last Summer.
so he had been kind of around Hollywood doing a lot of films.
And it was on the set of Neil's low-budget thriller, The Skulls, that inspiration struck. Thanks to this good-looking chap, Mr. Paul Walker.
Fast and Furious essentially started with him producing a Paul Walker movie, The Skulls.
Directed by soon-to-be Fast and Furious director Rob Cohen. Rob happened to be talking ideas with Paul.
And, they asked what he wanted to do next. And he said something either with cars or where I'm an undercover cop.
Well, here's an idea. Why not both? Because Universal already had such a project in development.
And then he said 3 months later, they come back, with this article.
Years earlier, inside the pages of Vibe magazine, Universal execs had found and optioned a few thousand words on illegal street racing that they thought would serve as the backbone of a good summer movie, which is how it came across Neil's desk.
Neil Moritz read that article and said, gee, what a great movie.
Inside the article, Neil Moritz found exactly what Paul was looking for.
Paul was just kind of really excited about the idea.
Apparently so excited, he signed on before he even saw a screenplay.
His representatives were kind of like, what are you doing? He's like, hey, it's $1 million. I get to, look cool, hang out with my friends and drive cars.
But while the article explored the dark world of illegal street racing, it was born from rather humble beginnings.
At the time, I was a cover reporter at the New York Daily News.
Covering the mundane intersection of business and tech.
I wrote all kinds of stories, everything from how to get a mortgage to covering the return of Steve Jobs to Apple.
But after hours, Kenneth had picked up a new interest.
I had just learned how to drive and had just got my license. And for the first time in my 20s, got my first car.
A safe and reliable Honda Civic.
A grocery getter.
But even grocery getters deserve a little style.
I wanted to get new wheels. So I went to Honda and I told them, hey, I'm looking for new wheels. The person at the counter started yelling at me. I would violate my warranty and I'd lose the warranty and you can't do that.
But then something happened that would change the course of Kenneth's life.
He storms off and then his kind of 20-something assistant, kind of sketchy looking, kind of slinks over to the desk, looks both ways, hands me a crumpled up business card.
This was no ordinary business card.
And it turned out to be a card for his friend, a car tuner in, I think, Staten Island of all places.
More than just a mechanic, a car tuner is a wizard who can tune any engine for incredible performance, even the one inside a Honda Civic.
Of course, being a moron, I decided, why not? I'll just drive to Staten Island and go to some random person's garage. Turned out to be a great tuner, great guy. And he taught me about the physics of making cars go fast. I was hooked.
Thanks to his new friend, the car tuning guru, Kenneth's eyes were opened to a colorful new world.
There were Asians, there were white kids, there were black kids, Hispanic and Latino, but they were all sort of united by this one thing they really loved, which was just going fast and looking great.
Kenneth had found his tribe thanks to his humble Honda.
The Honda Civic at the time was one of the most popular cars for tuners, especially people with very little money. Because of that pure coincidence, it led me into the whole world of street racing.
Where fast, maxed-out cars meet a healthy disregard for traffic regulations on dark city streets.
I'd lived in New York my entire life. I'd never seen that. And figured since I was a journalist at the time, I should probably write about this.
And for this expose, Kenneth searched high and low for someone who'd be willing to share their story.
And somehow stumbled into Rafi.
Also known as Racer X. Ken started to do the story, and wherever he went, everybody will be mentioning my name.
But here's the thing about street racers.
I don't want to be seen. I don't care who he is. I don't want to talk to this guy.
Because what this person was doing, and we can't stress this enough, was very, very, very illegal.
At that time, we were going as fast as 160 miles an hour.
And with the fast cars, there was fast money to be made.
We didn't race for less than $1,000.
But Kenneth wouldn't be deterred.
So he actually got a friend of mine to introduce me to him.
And right away, Kenneth could tell that Rafi was
charismatic, very easygoing, just someone that you'd want to hang out with.
But Kenneth's angle was not concerned with the illegal side of Rafi's passion. He saw a bigger story.
So I wanted to write a story about people of color reappropriating something that's very deeply rooted in American culture, but also about this one guy rising up through the ranks and trying to get a life and a career out of this.
I think it was something very interesting by then, so I agreed to it.
For the next 2 years, Kenneth immersed himself in a high-octane world of illegal street racing.
He got to see what racing was about and understand it.
And there were a lot of kids, obviously, on the street. There were a lot of cars. There were also like families there, but it was like a whole kind of community thing.
And for him to come and understand what we were doing without judging us, that was very fulfilling for me.
But despite joining the fraternity, there was still one experience Kenneth hadn't yet been afforded.
I was building a car and he wanted to get in the car. And I'm like, I'm not sure if you want to do that.
Oh, but he did.
Like, yeah, I have to feel that's like the last thing, because I've seen it all already, so I want to know what's the excitement.
So Rafi straps Kenneth into
a hollowed out Civic.
This thing has, no interior, no nothing.
It's totally illegal to be on the streets.
Yeah, he's like all strapped up.
So Raphael did what racers do.
He guns it.
And I'm doing like 100 and something miles an hour. He's just scared of that.
I nearly pee my pants. Thought I was gonna die.
It was the perfect ending.
The issue went out. It took forever. I almost forgot about it. And then the studio called.
studio execs Scott Stuber, Holly Barrio, and Kevin Misher agreed to option Kenneth's expose. But they did have one reservation.
The executive producer asked, "What do you think the story is?" And the wrong answer, which is what I said, was, "Well, you read the story."
And so, someone else would need to turn this slice of life in the fast lane into a movie script. That's where this guy comes in.
My name is Gary Scott Thompson. I am the original writer on the first Fast and the Furious.
But Gary wasn't the studio's first choice.
The number I heard, which I don't believe, which was 250 writers had looked at it and couldn't crack it or figure it out the way anybody wanted it.
But he had all the qualifications needed to write about illegal street racing.
4 hours after I got my license on my 16th birthday, I got a ticket for reckless driving, racing, failure to stop at a posted sign, and there was a fourth thing on it, but I can't remember what it was.
And reading through Kenneth's article, Gary was stumped.
There's really not a story here, so what's a cool story? And obviously I just went, Romeo and Juliet's a cool story.
Gary figured he would write,
For I never saw true beauty till this night.
Romeo and Juliet in cars.
It was a romance between Paul Walker and Jordana Brewster.
In which Mia was Johnny Tran's little sister. Dominic and Brian were on the same side, like Romeo and Mercutio. Universal was happy with Gary's Shakespearean twist on teenage anti-heroes behind the wheel, until
Columbine happened.
A total of 15 people are believed to have died here. Investigators say this attack appears to have been carefully planned for a long time.
When Columbine happened, the studio comes back to Gary Scott Thompson and says,
We can't make this movie because of Columbine. Came down from the top. No movies that depict anything like bad like that.
The Columbine shooting had rattled the nation, and for months, studios were unsure how to proceed.
It basically was dead.
As America was gripped by tragedy, Gary Scott was losing another opportunity.
I was like, they wanted to make this. Oh my God, this is horrible.
But then Gary had a brainwave, thanks to some actual waves and a little bit of Keanu Reeves.
I definitely got a feeling on this.
He saw the way to reimagine the untitled Racer X script.
So I called back and I said, hey guys, this is what we do. I'm gonna put Point Break right over top of it.
In which an undercover cop infiltrates a group of thrill-seeking bank robbers.
Let me take that Point Break structure. We have an undercover cop, that way there's a hero. And they said, okay, cool, go try and make that happen.
So Gary did, replacing surfboards with hot cars. Now it was the story of undercover cop Brian O'Connor, infiltrating a diamond heist group led by street racer Dominic Toretto and his import car gang.
I live my life a quarter mile at a time.
Only to fall in love with Dominic's sister, Mia, and the gang's high-speed lifestyle. And when Gary turned in his script, the project was given a title.
Red Line was the working title.
Universal then brought the project to Neil, and with Rob and Paul signed on, the search began for the Bodie to Paul's Johnny Utah. It was time to address the Oliphant in the room.
The studio said, if you get Timothy Oliphant to play Dominic Toretto, you've got a green light.
And while Oliphant was a rising star, he bore little resemblance to Raphael.
The irony is he had just finished doing Gone in 60 Seconds.
Shit.
A movie that comes out a year before Fast.
Jeez.
Keep your pants on.
Felt like it would be a little too much to star in back-to-back car-oriented movies.
So Oliphant said, no, in 60 seconds.
Unbelievable. And I thought, no one's gonna wanna see this movie 8 or 9 different times.
The door was open for a new leading man, and one Hollywood newcomer not only bore a strong resemblance to Raphael, but he also had that New York swagger.
Vin was a struggling actor, in New York for years. He was working as a bouncer, like at a New York club.
But in 1995, he made a short that would mean his nightclub days were numbered.
Which audition are you here for?
The beer commercial.
Hey man, I'm gonna be honest with you. You're a little too late.
I actually appreciate your honesty.
Steven Spielberg sees multifacial and specifically carves out a role in Saving Private Ryan for Vin.
Captain, the decent thing to do is to at least take her down the road to the next town.
Spielberg wasn't the only one captivated by Vin's short film.
So Neil Moritz convinces the studio, this is the guy. Vin Diesel's the guy.
And unlike the struggling actor he played in Multifacial,
Neil Moritz said Vin walks in and it was like this light just shined on him. Oh my God, who is this guy? This guy's a movie star.
Right.
Neil Moritz is right. He
had a glow.
Suddenly, Neil realized it was his film that was being auditioned, not the other way around. Thankfully, Vin liked what he heard.
He says what, instantly made him want to sign up is they described the scene early on in the film where he's in the car and he kind of hits the gas and it then goes through his body and then into the car. As he described it, as like merging man and machine. And he's like, I'm in. I'm doing it.
Meanwhile, producers had settled on a relative unknown for the role of Dom's girlfriend.
Michelle Rodriguez, she had only done one movie at this point. Girl Fight, which was a really big indie breakout. She was incredible in it. And then she gets cast as Letty.
I smell skanks.
Very tough, very aggressive. I think one of the more legitimate characters.
But for the film's Juliet, producers went in a slightly different direction when they cast up-and-comer Jordana Brewster.
I believe she was going to Yale at the time, so very different background from Vin or Paul or Michelle, and she admits to being pretty intimidated walking into that.
Chad Lindbergh here. I was tapped to play the sensitive Jesse, but I nearly blew it. And at that time, I thought I wanted to be a very serious, independent actor, okay? Very, very serious. So I actually turned down the audition. Like an idiot.
Oh, God!
The next day, another agent called me from the same agency. He's like, yo, Chad, just go in, let him see you. All right, I'll do it. And that was it. We all read together, and later that day, I got the phone call that I had booked Redline.
Was this the kind of intelligence I can expect from you, O'Connor?
To play Agent Bilkins, Tom Barry was not the first choice.
Denise Chamian was the casting director, and they were trying to get someone. I don't remember, I don't know who it was, but it didn't work out, and Denise Chamian suggested me.
You gonna make me a liar?
Hot rods and muscle cars, and yeah, we can do that all day.
With Rick Yoon cast as the rival Johnny Train, the rapper Ja Rule as Edwin, Matt Schultz as Vince, and Johnny Strong as Leon, the Fast and Furious family was coming together. But like any family, there were disagreements.
There was a lot of, push and pull when it came to the actors. Reevaluation of plot lines, of the overall script.
Screenwriters David Ayer and Eric Bergquist were drafted in to punch up the script.
David Ayer was this young writer who grew up on the south side of LA, on the streets, kind of knew this world. And David Ayer basically said, yeah, I'll do this if I can set it in a world I know.
That world was a long way from New York.
We talked about moving to California because it would be very costly to shoot in New York.
So the script was updated to the sunny streets of Los Angeles, and Universal gave Redline the green light.
It was a pretty good script, I thought. Even though they continue to make changes, that's kind of normal.
As the executive producer, Doug was in charge of making the picture run on time and on budget.
I came in, physically produced the picture, budget, schedule, put the crew together.
Doug had experience with film logistics, having run Apocalypse Now like a military operation.
I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
That started my career in the movie business.
But even by Doug's standards, coordinating hundreds of cars was a challenge that needed someone who knew how to move fast cars fast.
My name's David Martyr, and I was the transportation coordinator.
David had seen it all before.
I did a movie years ago called Days of Thunder.
Hell, I thought this was gonna be a joke.
That's how they found me for Fast and Furious, because I could do big car movies.
David had the expertise to join the team, but actually, he was already part of the extended family.
My wife, Okul Martyr, was vice president of production for Universal Features, overseeing the Fast and Furious, so, nepotism begins at home.
But no sooner had David signed on than someone slashed his tires. That is to say, his budget.
They had a new head of production come in, and he came in and said, we can make this picture for $25 million. Well, at that time, just a regular walk and talk picture at Universal was 30 to 40 million. And for 25, it wouldn't be a car movie, or if it was, there would be any car crashes whatsoever.
And if it wasn't really a proper car movie, it wasn't for David.
We were like 8 weeks away from filming. My wife, Cool, said, they're asking you to do something that's totally impossible. You'll get a coronary from this.
So David put his foot down, and not on the gas.
I walked into Doug's office and I said, I quit. I can't do this.
Universal had a budget in mind for Redline, but at $25 million, for David, it crossed the line.
And I had never quit a show before, ever.
That was all it took to send a message to Universal.
And then they must have had some meetings because Doug said, start spending money.
And just like that, his $25 million budget got bumped up to a more reasonable $38 million, which is more than enough to cover his first purchase.
Doug Clybourne handed me a picture of the Supra and said, this is the type of car they want.
David went to his local newsstand and picked up a copy of Super Street.
I'm thumbing through it, and I come to an ad for something called NIRA, which is
National Import Racing Association, focusing 100% on Japanese tuner cars.
And there's a photograph of the yellow Supra right there. I took mine and I went, wow. And there was a phone number which led me to Craig.
It would be Craig Lieberman, who was then executive director of NIRA, but was still rather shocked that Hollywood was calling him of all people.
You gotta remember, I'm Joe Nobody.
But he did own the Supra, which he had customized and tuned to the tune of
about 40 grand.
But what really interested producers was Mr. Nobody's connections.
What's the most important thing about this movie? You got to find the real people that do this so it's authentic.
Craig was the real deal, and to prove it, he agreed to meet producers and show off his car.
So they're coming out, and I had the hood popped, and I had the trunk popped, and everybody's asking all these questions about the car and all that kind of stuff.
But director Rob Cohen had only one key question, and there was only one way to answer it.
So Rob decides he wants to go for a ride. So I get on the 101 freeway about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I just jump on the gas. I look down, I'm doing 130, allegedly. And I don't think he was scared, I think he was excited about it, you know.
And just like that, this Joe Nobody was a somebody on a major motion picture.
Rob says to me, "You're hired, you're our technical advisor." And I said to Dave, "What is that?" He goes, "Don't worry, you'll find out."
And David needed his help sourcing the 50 cars needed for the film, and fast.
We were under the gun. And so I got with Craig, and we had a casting call.
Just like you would for an actor, but this time it was for cars.
They need to portray the cars a certain way, so they have to look over-exaggerated. So they wanted cars with big wings, fancy graphics, a bunch of audio, video, flashy wheels, and all that kind of stuff.
Within days, Craig had assembled some of the fastest wheels in Southern California.
And in the Universal back lot, we must have had 70 or 80 cars come up. And Rob and the producers and everybody, they all walked through these, and I kind of told them, if you want to start this movie at the time you want to start it, out of these cars, you got to pick your cars.
And they had to go shopping on a budget.
I think it was only $1 million or $2 million total for all the picture cars.
Having Craig on board saved them from making several embarrassing mistakes.
If you look at the script, Paul Walker was originally in a Mitsubishi 3000 GT, and then he went into an Eclipse, which is going downhill.
Meaning it was a slower car.
So that's the wrong car.
But Craig suggested
we get the Mitsubishi Eclipse as his starter car, and then the Supra as a second car.
Craig also had a problem with Dom's car.
They had like a front-wheel drive Buick LeSabre for Vin Diesel's car, which would not have worked.
Instead, Craig recommended a Mazda RX-7.
But it was a tight fit for Vin Diesel because he's a big guy and it's a little car.
And for the rest of the cast, our producers got Leon an R33 Nissan Skyline, Jesse a VW Jetta, Letty a Nissan 240 SX, and even Mia got a pimped out Acura Integra.
Which worked out okay.
And just as fast as Craig was setting them up, David was knocking them down.
I made deals with these people to take their cars, and we just started replicating them.
Meaning they started making cheaper stunt car versions that they could wreck if needed, including Craig's Supra.
And I was laughing at them. Oh yeah, sure. Do you know what it took me to build that car? 2 weeks later, there's 4 of them identical sitting next to my car in the parking lot. So I had to use the key fob to identify which car was my car.
And just like the producers were learning the ins and outs of import car culture, so were the actors.